I'm just going to talk about my experience for a minute. It's Monday. It's 7 in the morning. This is outside working hours for me, which, I get that that's the norm now, but my colleague absolutely didn't care because she was on the East Coast and that's all that mattered. At the time, she was going to take over a lot of my work. I had been asking to transition to different things, and this was the arrangement, but she thought that made her my boss. It did not. She was supposed to understand the work, shadow the process, and eventually take some of it over. And I'd built a full process over years to manage the budget reporting, operations, campaign management, people development. I was the chief of staff. This was a lot of work, and it was established and defined. She didn't like that, so she rebuilt them. Her new tracking documents and spreadsheets that weren't working, new bold colors that were distracting. And I still can't figure out why she focused on that specifically, but I truly think she was colorblind. A different version of the same process that she figured could work just as well. It did not. And I told her that new version was subpar, that it didn't function the way it originally did, that this wasn't a stylistic preference. It was a structural problem. That conversation didn't go well either. She demanded I use her version of stuff and that I just fill out the updates so she could present them to our boss. Then she demanded weekly status updates at 7 a.m. on Mondays. I suggested Friday recaps, but she refused, even though we rarely had anything to talk about at that hour. I sat through a lot of those early Monday calls wondering what exactly I was supposed to be learning from someone who couldn't read a spreadsheet I'd already proven worked. Here's the thing. This wasn't really about spreadsheets and processes. It was a need to rebuild what already worked simply because she hadn't built it herself. A need to be the one who finds the better way, even when there wasn't one. A need to control the smallest details of someone else's process because using it as it was felt intolerable to her. And pay attention here already. She didn't have any new ideas. She simply wanted to dismantle something that already existed, use different colors, and say that she improved it. That's what we're talking about today. The micromanager, the boss, or the colleague who cannot let go, cannot delegate, and cannot trust a process they didn't personally control down to the smallest detail. If you've ever rebuilt something that already worked just to satisfy someone else's need to own it, well, this video is for you. I'm Christina Holloway. For over 25 years, I've coached senior leaders at organizations like Google, GE, and Spotify to architect their authority and navigate the high-stakes politics of the Fortune 500. On this channel, I show you how to recognize the power plays hiding in plain sight and how to communicate with the presence that demands a seat at the table. Last week, we talked about the immovable boss, the boss who can't say yes, no matter how good the idea is. Today, we're adding the next chapter to the direct response playbook. This one doesn't refuse to move. This one can't stop moving, circling the same details, the same revisions, the same need to touch everything themselves. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk about what's actually happening underneath the behavior I just described. The micromanager is complex, and it's one of the most misunderstood patterns in this series. So your first instinct is probably that this person doesn't trust you, or that they're a control freak by nature, or that they simply enjoy power for its own sake. In my experience, though, none of that is quite right. The micromanager is driven by something closer to fear than to control. And we could say that about any of these behavior patterns. People driven by fear are going to behave in a broken way. And that takes me back to the Hogan Development Survey. It's specifically outlined on what's called the diligent scale. And it's a scale, meaning we have degrees of micromanagement, but getting to this end of the scale is showing us how bad it can get. Hogan describes this pattern as being hardworking, detail-oriented, and holding exceptionally high standards of performance for yourself and others. In the right context, that's a genuine asset. You want a diligent person handling your compliance review, your safety audit, your financial close. This is someone who will not let a critical detail slip past them. But Under pressure, the same trait becomes something else entirely, and usually something we're all more familiar with. A high diligent person gets lost in the details of a project. They have trouble prioritizing because everything starts to feel equally important. They miss deadlines because they're focused on their effort to make the work perfect. And critically, they micromanage others and struggle to delegate because delegating means trusting someone else to meet a standard they've invented in their own head. Here's the thing about micromanagement. There are two distinct fears driving this behavior, and they show up differently depending on the person. The first fear is being the one who didn't think of it. This is the boss who cannot let a subordinate solve a problem independently, propose an idea in a meeting, or collaborate with a peer without express permission. The reason? Because if someone else finds the answer or contributes outside the micromanager's definition of success, it means they've lost control. What am I actually contributing if I can't control the outcome? The second fear is being exposed as having shipped something less than perfect. This is the colleague who keeps refining, keeps tweaking, keeps finding one more thing to adjust until the deadline passes. They genuinely believe the next revision will finally be good enough. It's usually not. They're just too fixated on formatting. PowerPoint presentations are their Achilles heel. They will never stop messing with one. I worked with someone like this too. She'd say, "Sorry it's late, but at least it's done right." No, girl, you set us behind by a week. Their standards are never really about the work either. It's about avoiding the feeling of having sent something imperfect out into the world with their name on it. So both fears produce the same outcome. Talented people around them feel suffocated, second-guessed, and furious about the wasted energy. And here's the frustrating part. Sometimes this behavior is legitimate. If you're managing someone who is genuinely underperforming, then more structure, more check-ins, and more oversight can be exactly the right call while they build capability and confidence. That is not the pattern we're talking about today. What we're talking about is what happens when this behavior gets applied to a high-performing, self-directed team that has already earned autonomy, when structure stops being support and becomes suffocation. That's the micromanager. Someone managing their own fear by controlling everyone around them and calling it high standards. It is very easy to not like these people. Now, we're going to talk about the different types of micromanager, and I came up with an analogy of them trying to control their reality by tightening their grip on the situation. So we're going to go with that, and I hope it makes sense. In my coaching practice, I've seen micromanagers show up in three distinct ways. Each one comes from a different place on the Hogan diligence scale, and each one creates a different kind of damage. The first grip is the hoarder. The hoarder holds an exceptionally high standard of performance. Hogan describes this directly as maintaining very high performance standards for yourself and others. So on its own, sure, that's admirable. The problems happen when the standard becomes something only one person can meet. The hoarder cannot delegate because delegating means trusting someone else's judgment over their own. So this is the person who will tell you, well, it was easier for me to do it because it's quicker. Well, I talk about this client before in another video, but he delegated assignments to all his team leads, and the one came back and had done it all herself. She didn't delegate any of it, and that's what my client wanted. Then she got mad that he didn't appreciate all the work she had done. She missed the point. I worked with another client who finally landed the promotion she had wanted for years. Then the job itself was exactly what she wanted. The catch was the micromanaging boss who came with it. And she knew this going in. She knew this was going to be a rough ride. And this boss could not at all let her have a win. Not at all. My client had to ask permission to do everything, and she was never allowed to do outreach without making sure her boss knew about it. No surprises, she said. We worked on this for a long time because hoarders often do get results, right? Just not sustainable ones, and rarely without burning out everyone working underneath them. The second grip is the polisher. The polisher is perfectionistic about the quality of the work and obsessed with the details of its completion. Hogan's language here is precise. Perfectionistic, obsessed with details. This is not someone who cares about quality. This is someone who cannot determine when quality has been achieved. I worked on a major industry report years ago, one with a clear, established format. No elaborate design, just clean data submitted on time, because the entire value of the report was the data itself. And that's what the vendor wanted. That was the directive. A new team took it over. The person now responsible for it had no real interest in understanding why the format existed the way it did. So she let an outside contractor take the lead. Well, the contractor decided the report needed to look distinctive. So a design team was brought in. Time and money was spent making it visually striking, layered, and polished. It was ridiculous and not what they wanted at all. And I remember feeling extreme frustration and clear embarrassment for what that final product represented, a complete lack of communication and understanding of the final effort. The polisher doesn't understand the actual work. They just keep polishing it until they've lost the plot. The third grip is the literalist. The literalist is meticulous and inflexible about schedules, timing, rules, and procedures. Hogan's language is pretty accurate here. Inflexible, not careful. Inflexible. This is the person who reads an instruction so literally that it loses its meaning. A deadline isn't a target to be managed intelligently. It is an absolute. A process isn't a tool meant to serve the work. It is the work. When reality doesn't match the procedure exactly, the literalist doesn't adjust the procedure. They wait, stall, or escalate because deviation itself feels painful. You need permission to do this. More uncomfortable than missing the bigger objective is. Where the hoarder needs to be the answer and the polisher needs to avoid being wrong, the literalist needs the process itself to be followed exactly, even when following it exactly is precisely what's getting in the way. Here's what all three grips share. Each one began as a genuine strength, high standards, attention to detail, respect for process. I mean, none of that is the problem. The problem is what happens when a real strength starts serving an unspoken fear. Those people show you their fear in deadlines missed, autonomy stripped away, and good work delayed past the point of success. So let's ask the question again. Why do capable, talented professionals keep over-delivering to someone who can never quite be satisfied? Well, we fall into this trap because we want to succeed, and that's why we're at work, and many times we can get caught up in this broken behavior. So let's unpack this. At first, the instinct is to assume this is a quality problem. If the hoarder won't let you act independently, you bring him more detail, more justification, more proof that your judgment can be trusted. If the polisher keeps finding flaws, you refine the work further, hoping the next version finally clears the bar. If the literalist balks at a reasonable deviation, you follow the letter of the process even more precisely, hoping rigid compliance will finally earn you some flexibility. None of it works, and here's why. You are trying to solve a confidence problem with competence. But competence was never the actual issue. The hoarder isn't doubting whether you can solve the problem. He's managing his own fear of becoming unnecessary. The polisher isn't evaluating whether the work is good. She's avoiding the moment where imperfect work leaves her hands and becomes irreversible. The literalist isn't actually protecting the integrity of the process. He's avoiding the discomfort of a decision that falls outside the rules. He's protecting. Every time you respond with more effort, more detail, or more compliance, you are feeding the exact mechanism driving their behavior. So more work from you doesn't relieve the pressure you're feeling. This is the trap. You believe you're one good answer away from being trusted, or one polished draft away from being finished, or one compliant submission away from being given some room to breathe. You are not. At the end of the day, this is about managing someone else's fear. And you cannot outperform someone else's fear. You can only change how you respond to it. The goal here isn't to fix the micromanager. You're not going to talk someone out of a fear they don't know they have. The goal is to give them what they actually need, visibility and reassurance, without surrendering your own autonomy in the process. And I want to be clear here, micromanagers are extremely difficult to deal with. If they have even a little bit of authority, they will completely undermine all of your best efforts. These moves are intended to preserve your sanity. 5 moves. Let's go. Move number 1, give visibility before it's demanded. Most of this pattern is triggered by uncertainty. The hoarder fills silence with control because silence feels like risk. So don't leave silence for them to fill. Send the short update before it's requested. Flag the decision you're about to make. before you make it, briefly in writing. This isn't asking permission. It's removing the uncertainty that makes them reach for control in the first place. Counterintuitively, the more proactively visible you are, the less reason they have to hover. Move number 2, set the definition of done before the work begins. The polisher's central problem is that finished is a moving target. Your job is to nail it down before the work starts, not negotiate it after. At the outset of a project, get explicit agreement on what completion actually looks like, the specific deliverable, the specific standard, the specific date. When the polisher tries to add another round of revision past that point, you're not arguing about quality. You're pointing back to a definition they already agreed to. That's a fundamentally different and much stronger conversation. Move number 3, translate intent, not just instructions. The literalist only sees what's in front of them, so give them more than that. When you make a request, state the underlying goal alongside the specific ask. Not just what you need, but why it matters. I need this by Thursday because the client meeting moved up. That lands very differently than I need this by Thursday. You're giving the literalist something new to attach to, and that new shiny object is client satisfaction. It's pretty hard for a literalist to act in a way that disappoints the client. They can't bear it. Move number 4, document the pattern, not the person. If this behavior is genuinely affecting outcomes, you'll eventually need to raise it, but raising "my boss micromanages me" rarely lands well because it sounds like a personality complaint rather than a business problem. Instead, document the cost, the delayed deliverable, the missed opportunity because a decision sat waiting for approval too long, the hours spent on the report's appearance while the substance went unreviewed. The pattern expressed in outcomes and timelines is a far more persuasive case than the description of someone's character ever will be. And I've said this before, address the behavior, not the person. Move number 5, adjust the move when the patterns combine. Someone watched last week's video and asked exactly this question, and it's a good one. What happens when your immovable boss is also a micromanager? What happens when I see multiple different toxic behaviors in one person? First of all, I'm sorry you're going through that. And the answer is that you don't need to choose one playbook over the other. You layer them. So, for example, if you're dealing with a person who puts up walls to block your progress or success, find ways to create alliances that diffuse their stonewalling. And once something does move forward, you may see you have a micromanager who constantly wants to make the final output perfect, for example. Get that person to agree on a deadline and hold to it. Or move their contributions to the end so they don't unravel the entire timeline. This keeps them from tightening their grip around your deliverable. Yeah, it's slower, it takes more patience, but the same core principle holds across both patterns. You're not trying to change who this person is. You are managing the specific fear in front of you one move at a time. Quick note, yes, this is a lot. And if you have to work with someone who's a hot mess, the natural instinct is to leave. You should find ways to move away from these people, but you should also find ways to deal with them for the time being because they never really go away, unfortunately. So real quick, remember my spreadsheets from the beginning of this video? It was never really about the spreadsheets, right? It was never really about the colors or the formulas or whether Monday at 7 a.m. was a reasonable time for a call. It was not. Underneath all of it was someone trying to prove she belonged in a role by rebuilding something that already worked, because if she simply used what already existed, what exactly would she have contributed? That's the thing about every grip we talked about today. The hoarder, the polisher, the literalist, none of them started out trying to make your work life harder. Somewhere underneath the behavior is a person managing a fear they've probably never said out loud, even to themselves. It's their insecurity, which means the fix isn't persuasion. It's strategy. Next week, we close out this series with the most calculating pattern of the 4, the dirty player. This is an extremely toxic person. It's the colleague or boss who operates by an entirely different set of rules and what to do when the normal playbook doesn't apply. If today's video names something you're dealing with right now, if you recognize the hoarder, the polisher, or the literalist, or maybe a combination of more than one, let me know in the comments below which grip you're navigating. Naming it clearly is always the first move. My free communication toolkit is linked in the description below. And if you're ready to get a clearer, data-driven picture of your own leadership patterns, the Hogan Leadership Blueprint is linked there as well. On a final note, where in your professional life are you tightening your own grip out of fear rather than necessity? And what would it look like to loosen it just slightly as an act of trust rather than control? Sit with that and then take action. I'm Christina Holloway. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.